Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in the entire world, which is coaching. So for those of you that don't know, my name is John Sears. I'm the Lean Coordinator at the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and I have been coaching since January of 2020. I started coaching as a way to engage more with greenbelts and also to spread continuous improvement on a more one-to-one individualistic level. And it's one of the things that I've been most proud of since coming into this role, and I think it's brought a lot of benefits. So we're going to be talking specifically about practicing the coaching kata, but we're also going to talk about coaching in general and the role that it plays in being a leader. So I hope we can have that fruitful discussion today. So I want to start with you all by asking you a very simple but very theoretical question. What's the difference between being a leader and being a manager? You can either raise your hand and I'll call on you, or if you want to go ahead and type it in the chat, I'd love to see it. And I'm not interested so much in the clinical definition. I know the state of Vermont defines it very specifically, but just at a metaphorical level, what's the difference between a leader and a manager? Caitlin.
Thanks, Sean. I'd say managers are those who are really good at handling the day-to-day tasks of supervising people, so operational management, whereas being a leader is more about inspiring others and creating visions and strategic plans and motivating others to be better at their work. So like more bigger picture nebulous stuff, whereas management is more nitty-gritty operational details.
That's great perspective. Thank you. Marcella says leadership can be exercised whether or not you're managing a person or a project. That's a great point. Through my coaching, I've worked with people in several different agencies and several different departments, and I don't supervise any of those people. I've also coached people that are leaders of entire divisions as well as staff people. So anyone can be coached and anyone can coach. Any other thoughts on the difference between being a leader and a manager? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how we grow as leaders and as managers. And it ultimately comes down to leadership styles. So this is one theory of evolution of leadership. And it starts in directing, which is low directive, low support behavior. So we all know what directing is. It's I'm telling you what to do and how to do it. Now, in every leadership instance, there's the person that is leading and then the person that's following. And every one of those relationships you have will evolve. And it's that evolution that this tracks. So you might progress with one person, but still need to progress with other people. And that's perfectly normal. But in general, it follows from directing to coaching, which we're going to talk about today. And coaching is more, well, we'll go into coaching, so I won't talk too much about it now. But then subsequently, we move into supporting and then finally delegating. So what's the difference between directing and delegating? Does anyone want to take a shot at that? Because they're both low support behaviors. Yeah, go ahead. Gianna?
Yeah, I'd imagine that directing is giving sort of a lot of information or like restrictions around how you want something completed, whereas delegating is sort of like complete this task, and not a lot of definitions around what it has to look like to get from A to B, just B at the end point.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to trust, right? Do I trust the person to deliver a product that meets the vision that I have? And that vision, that merging of person to the group or the unit comes about through supporting efforts. So you can see how all of this stuff sort of builds together where you're developing the trust and developing expertise in the coaching area. Supporting builds out that larger vision. And then delegating is everyone's in the fold, everyone knows what's acceptable, and everyone is moving forward with a large degree of trust. So these are all 4 of the leadership styles that we can progress through developing from low competence to high competence. But statistically, we can see that 54% of leaders can only use one style. And if you have to progress from here to here, that means that coaching is the gateway. Coaching is the pathway to greater levels of leadership. And so I see a lot of directing. I don't see a lot of coaching. I see very little actual delegation. We have a lot of directing going on where I have to tell you exactly what I need. Here's what I need. Here's all the requirements that it has. The walking people through it, or that's not good enough, whatever, I'll just do it. It's a lot of, I need to send this to you for approval, and then we send it to the next person for approval. How you know you're in a directing style leadership organization is a lot of approvals where things have to progress through steps because there's not a lot of trust. And we build trust through coaching and supporting. So as a leader, you're going to approach each team, person, and skill differently based on how developed you are. You won't progress through this just once in your lifetime. You will progress through this every single time with every single person, with every single team you work with. And you're always going to start here, but the challenge is progressing to coaching, supporting, and delegating. So we have to unlock coaching before we can really recognize this Shangri-La of delegating, which is, I'm focused on the high level. I'm focused on us meeting our strategic goals. I'm focused on progress and meeting the larger obligations of the department or agency that my group works towards, while I trust my staff to do what they need to do. So that's why coaching is so critical for leaders, and it's what we're going to talk about today. So what is coaching in the abstract? I think we all know what a coach is, right? We've all seen or played sports. Coaching is a guided learning experience. It's about, in the workplace, a one-on-one relationship between 2 people. It's a contract between a learner and a coach. And the learner is committing to growth, to learning, to further themselves. And the coach is committing to advocate and enable. So it's a partnership that has to work both ways. You can't coach someone that doesn't want to be coached. And if you're not prepared to step aside or experience failure, then you're not ready to be a coach. So ultimately, though, coaching is about listening, providing expertise, and growing the learner. That has to be your focus if you want to be successful. In order to move forward, how do we measure that? That's where the improvement kata comes in. So kata is just the Japanese word for practice. The improvement kata is a very simple idea, which is applying scientific thinking to continuous improvement. It's comparing what you think, which is the theory, and that's often as far as we get, with what actually happens, which is evidence, and adjusting based on that evidence. So what it leads to is these 4 steps, which is get direction. So where are we trying to get to? What's our ultimate goal? What are we striving for? Grasping the current condition. So how far away are we from where we need to go? Establishing a target condition. So what is not the final goal, but what is an achievable next goal? What is an achievable thing we can strive towards? And we'll be going into this a lot more in depth in 2 weeks when we talk about results-based accountability. But establishing a target condition that's achievable in a set time frame is extremely vital to the improvement kata, and we'll see how these things come together in just a minute. And then it's about conducting experiments. So you do something and you test to see, are you closer to your target condition or are you farther away? How much closer are you? How much closer do you still need to get? And that ability to measure and progress is intrinsic to practicing the coaching kata. And as a corollary, you're conducting experiments, so you could fail. And one of the things that I teach my son all the time, he's 4, is that you're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay, because it's through those failures that we learn and we grow the most. So you can't look at failure as, this is impossible, we can't allow for this. It's about learning. And sometimes the person you're coaching is going to want to try something, and you're going to think, I don't think that's going to work. in my mind, I can rattle off a dozen reasons why this won't work. But you have to let them try it. Find out for themselves. Or they might prove you wrong, and it might turn out that the thing they're going to try is going to work. But that's the mindset you have to come at this about. It's about growth and learning. And if you don't come at it with that approach, you're not going to make any progress. All right, so how do we tie this improvement kata thing in with the coaching thing? It's the coaching kata, and it's, again, coaching practice, and it basically is a roadmap for being a coach. If you don't know where to start with coaching, the coaching kata is a great place to start because it comes with a frame up of questions that you can work through as you develop. What is your own voice as a coach? How do you want to work through this stuff? You won't be using these 5 questions eternally. You will use it as a starting place to learn and grow. That's what I did when I first started. But now, if you were attending one of my coaching sessions, you wouldn't even recognize these questions in our conversation, but I would be working through them just in my own style, in my own way, in my own cadence. But fundamentally, it's working individually with someone through the improvement kata. What is your target condition? And you're meeting with your coachee once a week, maybe daily if you can swing that, whatever frequency you need. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of steps. What is the target condition? So what is that number 3? What is the step that you are working towards? What is your actual condition? So how far away are you to reaching that condition? And assuming we're meeting regularly, we will have last steps that were taken in previous meetings. And so we reflect on that last step. Because this is about learning, we ask questions that reflect that, which is, what did you do in your last step? What did you expect to happen? What actually happened? And what did you learn? So that's where comparing metrics of what you expect to happen and what did happen all comes into the learning experience. And then we can return to question 3. What obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching your target condition? One of the things that I've found through coaching is every experiment might get you a little bit closer to your goal, but it will also make a half dozen new obstacles appear. And that's perfectly normal because the experiments are tackling obstacles. So when you say, what is your next step? What's the experiment? It's overcoming a new obstacle. And so it's a project that defines itself as you move forward. Each new experiment leads to new obstacles. Each obstacle leads to a new experiment. And the whole time you are incrementing towards your goal. And then how quickly can we go and see what we have learned from taking that step? Now, in manufacturing, that might be a day, right? You spend a day with a change in procedure. The next day you check in on it, and the numbers have changed because you've made 300 widgets. In government service, that's a little bit different. You might meet once a week or once every 2 weeks. And the key is that you're meeting regularly. And through that, you can see each other and implement those experiments. If the experiment takes a little bit longer, maybe you have a little bit of flexibility in how you schedule that. But the key is that you have to check in on it so that you can go through these 5 questions over and over and over again each time, reminiscing about the experiment and how it worked and how it shifted the balance. So as we work through the coaching kata, the learner has what's called a learner board. And we use this to track everything that we've talked about in the coaching kata. So it's got our challenge and the process that we're focusing on for this stage. It has our target condition, both in terms of the metrics that we want to measure and when we want to achieve it by. We're tracking the current condition in an ongoing basis. These might end up being charts as you move up towards a desired goal, or down if you're trying to cut down permitting time, for example. An ongoing record of the experiments you've tried, because you're going to be trying a bunch of experiments. If you're meeting on a weekly basis, you're talking a year. If you do this for a year, although not many coaching projects I have lasted a year, you're going to have 52 experiments, right? So you want to be able to keep track of those experiments and track how your current condition is progressing towards your target condition. And you're going to need to keep a running total of your obstacles because they're going to grow, and you want to be able to basically, as long as you have a list of obstacles, you have potential experiments that you can run. And heck, maybe you even surpass your targets, because every obstacle you encounter represents waste or a lack of efficiency in the process. So the more you can tackle, the better the process can get. And the whole time, this is a learner-led experience. The learner's deciding, this is the obstacle I want to tackle. This is how I want to tackle it. It's not uncommon as a coach to provide guidance as far as, um, you know, you can get easily overwhelmed by the number of obstacles that you encounter. I've had a lot of people that I've coached that have been like, there's too much. There's things here and here and here and here. I'm like, it's okay. We're going to tackle this one obstacle at a time. What's the next obstacle we can tackle? And it's about providing support, answering questions, and listening, all so that the learner can grow and evolve. So how can you implement the Coaching Kata? So how can you take it from what we're talking about now to making it work? So you can work with a coach, for example, me. If you are interested in the coaching experience, I can provide coaching services to sort of give you a glimpse at how it's intended to work. There aren't really any other coaches at the moment. There are a lot of people who I have coached, and Justin, Kinney, and I have discussed the possibility of growing coaching in the Greenbelt Network. But right now I'm the only coach that's available. But any manager can coach their staff and should coach their staff if they want to grow through that arc that we looked at, because that's the gate that locks off the supporting and delegating categories. And ultimately, it comes down to defining the challenge and setting targets with a coach and experimenting, being okay with failure, and then setting a schedule and keeping to it. As long as you're experimenting and keeping track of your obstacles, sometimes the data piece can be a little hard to mesh, especially because a lot of the stuff we do doesn't naturally lend itself to really obvious metrics like time to produce or things like that. But the more you can tie it in with data, the better it works. And the more you're open to experimentation and trying new things and refraining. And as a coach, I'll tell you, sometimes it's really hard not to be like, I don't know about that approach. I think I'd rather you do it this way. But the learning is all about holding that back and letting them learn from the experience. And maybe you can offer tips and tricks to make the thing they try more successful. But ultimately, the experiments are up to the learner and guiding them through it. So let's say you've adopted coaching and now you're a manager who's coaching your staff. What does it mean? What is it going to give you? Why should you bother besides just progressing through that arc, right? Well, you're realizing improved conditions because you're getting your people to think about how can I do my work better, but they're leading the experience. They view it as empowerment and you get improved conditions for your team. Incremental improvement, and it's agile because you're doing it one-on-one. So it's not this big, complicated project spanning multiple months with huge IT investments and all that stuff. And ultimately, that stuff may be valuable and useful, but it all can also be exhausting. And so the smaller scale of the types of projects you can tackle with coaching can really provide real benefits to both the staff we're working with and to the coach. And it develops relationships. One of my favorite things about being a coach is the relationships I've developed with the people that I'm coaching, because it means I get to talk to them more. I get to see what kinds of problems they're experiencing, and I get to help them overcome them, all while not telling them what to do, but just by being there, by being supportive. The coaching flows very naturally into the supporting behaviors, and you'll really see an ease of transition into that third category if you really embrace coaching and learn to make it work for you. And the focus on metrics makes it easier to measure. You could be measuring things you weren't measuring before, and it can be very valuable. And at a personal level, it's about learning lessons, even from failure, especially from failure, because the reality is in state government, we are terrified of failure, and yet we fail all the time. the goal is to be less scared of it, because when we're scared of failure, we're afraid to experiment, we're afraid to try new things. And that also prevents us from stumbling on some of the great answers that we could be looking for, where an idea I've tried a dozen times and one of my learners wants to try, it's like, I've never had any success with that, but if you want to do it, go ahead. They could find the missing ingredient that I have not brought to the table. Just because I've had an experience doesn't mean that's how the experience is always going to go. Or they find that they fail too, and that, like, that's a process that doesn't work for them either. But either way, that's a learning experience. Oops. So you'll learn new approaches, you'll grow confidence. So staff can oftentimes feel kind of stifled. This sort of taking charge of their own growth and their own progression really has an empowering effect on staff. And it develops that understanding and that key trust between the person and the work, and you and that person, that didn't exist there before. It's a great, and being a coach grows you as a leader and really develops the trust that is needed to make these teams work. So I just want to wrap up with a few of the comments that I've had from people that I've coached and around the coaching program. So I've had a lot of stress around this task, but stress decreased within just a few weeks of the practicing the coaching kata. I like coaching because it empowers me to set my direction and helps me commit to meeting my goals. This is from the learner supervisor. I feel the difference. She is taking the initiative to make things happen. Coaching Kata helps me get unstuck when I'm overwhelmed by the big picture and there are too many paths. Spirit of experimenting with different approaches and testing how to improve these things is helpful. Having weekly check-ins helps me to make little bits of progress every week. Sometimes just a check-in is enough to get people motivated and activated and empowered. And so I really want to stress, like, I reached out to people asking them for their thoughts on coaching, and this is what came back to me. So this is people supervisors being happier with the coaching experience, the people that are getting coached happy with the experience. I found it incredibly valuable to be a coach, and it's my favorite part of doing my job. So with that, I'm going to stop and ask if there are any questions out there. Feel free to raise your hand or drop a line in the chat. Okay. I don't see any questions. I know we're a little bit lighter today because of the schedule shift, but oh, Michaela asked, how long are the coaching meetings? So one of the wonderful things about practicing the coaching kata is it's just working through those 5 questions. I typically schedule a half an hour. Usually it takes less time than that. Anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes is usually how long it takes if we stick to just the coaching kata questions. So it can be very quick. And how many people am I typically coaching at a given time? Well, right now I actually only have 2 people that I'm coaching, maybe 2.5. But at one point I was coaching as many as 8 people. I would not want to do more than that. At that point, it was a lot of reoccurring meetings, and even though they're short, they can really chop up the day if you're not careful. But the great thing about this is, as the coach, this is not a huge time investment for either the coach or the learner. It's not a huge investment. It's about focused attention and reorienting yourself towards the idea of experimentation and overcoming obstacles in experimentation. So those are both really great questions. Anything else? Is the work plan in addition to the annual work plan? I'm not certain what work plan you're talking about. Oh, so I have used coaching as part of my work plan. It's how I grow and evolve. I don't think it's on the skills sheet, but you could definitely use it as part of your Greenbelt development plan, because coaching is a great way of growing your leadership skills. You really get invested in the challenges that other people are facing and learn how to work with people in a really effective way. So I would definitely encourage you to, if you're a green belt and you're interested in growing your leadership skills, to reach out to me and explore coaching as an option. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone so much for coming today.
Ellen?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. I apologize if I missed it. I was this figure here with the organizational culture. I was wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit more in terms of like, as a manager, trying to find this balance of like supporting our team and shaking things up, but also acknowledging capacity constraints, and that like this balancing act of trying to make it a priority to make incremental progress while also being respectful and acknowledging the stressors that folks are under right now with workload. And I don't know if you have any tips on how we can kind of set realistic expectations around that, but also making meaningful progress forward.
Yeah, so ideally, coaching is oriented not around a special new project that's a new thing we're taking on. It's about the work that we're currently doing and how can we do it better. So functionally, this can replace check-in meetings, because it is the check-in that we're having, and we're progressing and focusing on organizational goals. And so it can really help us row in the same direction. And I've heard anecdotally some people that I have coached about coaching. Sometimes you have staff that they aren't progressing in the way that you'd like, and you're really like trying to edge them along, and you're trying to convince them to do things, and they're not going along. But the second you're like, here's where I want to get to, what can you do to help us get there? And the second that they have control over, they feel like they have control over their destiny, that they can figure out a solution to a problem themselves, it really motivates people and gets them oriented. And coaching is a great way if you're like, I love continuous improvement, but I don't have time for big Kaizen events. I don't have time to tackle these new projects. It's bite-sized, it's micro, it's tiny, it's incremental. This is the best thing imaginable for someone that wants to improve their experience at work, that wants to improve generally how they feel, and you just can't find the time because it is such light in terms of commitment, and it's so self-guided that people are self-motivated, and you're checking in regularly, and you feel supported in a way that you might not have ever before if you are the learner in this experience, because you feel like just someone asking you about how you're progressing towards a thing is a show of support that says this work you're doing is valuable, this effort that you're expending to improve how you do things, maybe on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis, is going to not just make your life better, but will also grow our relationship. And so it's really a morale boost too. It really is, if you shift your mindset towards experimentation, and it does take a little bit of letting your hands off the reins a little bit, right? Because you're not picking the experiments. You're not saying how they have to do it. You have to develop that trust incrementally, piece by piece, and coaching is how you can do that in a safe, guided way. And it's really the next step I think we need in order to grow our state leaders. Does that answer your question, Emily?
Yeah, I think it does. In looking at sort of introspective of like, these are the things we're doing now, and identifying incremental opportunities to make improvements, and having that just sort of be more like woven into our work rather than like a whole standalone initiative that feels like taking on more workload, rather looking at it as sort of incremental improvements to the work we already carry. And yeah, thank you. That is helpful.
And this work here will really fit in nicely with the next couple of topics we're going to be talking about. The next session is going to be on results-based accountability. So we'll be talking a lot more about metrics and setting priorities, which will feed into our final talk, which is about strategic planning and making all of this stuff fit together in a cohesive operational plan. So I want to thank everyone for your attendance today. As always, you're free to reach out to me, and if you want to learn more about coaching or about how to implement coaching or being a coach or receiving coaching for some of your staff, I have plenty of capacity to coach folks. Just let me know if you want to hear anything else in the future. If not, I will be in touch with the next training. So thank you all for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.